Another report on risk factors for offending. And again, what you'll see is this basically looks pretty similar to the last slide, and the basic reason for that is that the risk factors that lead to the likelihood of someone being victimised, this is true for the general population as well as for Indigenous Australians, tend to be very much the same risk factors as for offending. So if you engage in risky alcohol use, at some point there's a good chance you'll end up having a violent altercation with someone. In one case you'll be the offender, in another case you'll be the victim. Your chances of being involved in that are much greater. Males are more likely to engage in offending. And again, there's that whole issue around the age brackets and peak age of offending. So the thing with the victimisation before is that the peak ages for victimisation are very much the same. As, you've basically got the same kind of group of people offending and victimising. And same thing in employment and education as strong predictors, the deficits in those. And childhood exposure to violence becomes a very strong predictor. If you're exposed to violence as a child, there's a much greater likelihood that you'll be involved in violence as an offender and also as a victim as well in later life, and that's where you get this kind of cycle of violence that generates, and you get that intergenerational transmission of violence as well. There was we did a review, just to give you an idea of the breadth of stuff we've done. Northern Territory Department of Justice basically conducted across a whole range of remote communities in the Northern Territory this media, an awareness and education campaign around the media classification system. It was basically came from a recognition in the Little Children Are Sacred report, initially that there were problems with especially young people being exposed to pornographic material in a lot of Indigenous communities, as they are in other communities, and the concerns and the risks about that then contributing to problems. And there is evidence that exposure to pornography can contribute to increased risk of involvement in sexual violence. So basically the NT Department of Justice conducted this campaign, the pornography education campaign, right across these remote communities. That was something that we conducted a review of, found that they'd followed an effective process in doing that, and they've actually just got, largely as a result of kind of that work and what we're able to demonstrate, and the recommendations, a whole lot of funding to continue that program and do it on a broader scale across the territory. And we in turn have just got funding to do a full evaluation of that over a couple of years to look at how effective that's been. This baseline mapping was work that we did, came out of the Council of Australian Governments Remote Service Delivery National Partnership, where basically all the Australian governments have gone together and decided they need to improve the kind of services that are available out in remote communities around the whole range of education, health and welfare, as well as justice and safety. And this whole work basically developing these profiles for 29 remote communities across 5 jurisdictions. And we contributed that with basically getting data from police, courts and corrections across all those jurisdictions, and contributing to that alongside the health and welfare and whatever data, as well as a whole range of service delivery information, basically trying to map out exactly what kinds of services. If you live in this particular community, what sort of access have you got to, say, legal aid, to victim support, to being able to meet your parole conditions and so on. Are those services available in that community? If not, where do you have to go and get them? And how does that compare with other non-Indigenous communities in terms of how accessible those services are? So it's something that is then going out to communities, and through FACS's work is kind of directly contributing to planning for service delivery improvements in those communities. I'm just about out of time, and I don't want to hold people up from their morning tea. So let's look at this quickly. Another thing we've done, which hopefully is just about to be published, is we did a survey across Indigenous communities in urban, rural and remote areas, basically looking at issues of community safety, what kind of safety problems people experience, what kind of services are available there, what are Indigenous people doing within their communities to improve these things and deal with some of the issues that are there. So really focusing on the positive kinds of improvements as well. We've developed up a questionnaire and methodology specifically for Indigenous communities in doing this. For this particular kind of piloted part of the research, it focused on perceptions around these issues amongst service providers working in communities, many of whom were Indigenous themselves, many of whom were members of that community. So it's a little bit a step away from interviewing community members directly, which is something we're contributing to through some other work we're doing for FACSIA. Basically, the survey covered all those areas of community strengths, social problems, and so on. Covered off, as I say, both remote communities, small towns, and larger communities across all 4 jurisdictions. Five. Basically, the main social problems that came out of this were things like overcrowding in homes, which, even though isn't a crime problem, directly contributes to it. Misuse of alcohol, problems of young people being out unsupervised at night. And not going to school, and things like family violence and misuse of alcohol really emerged as what were perceived to be the biggest problems. Some interesting stuff we looked at around help-seeking behaviour and the fact that victims of crime are really unlikely to report to police. There's huge problems of underreporting and non-disclosure of violence, much more likely to turn to family or kin for support. We looked at that, particularly around females, issues around fear of payback and retribution, and shame and mistrust of the police as well as kind of big things that emerges. And it's a really huge problem because not reporting violence, therefore not getting the help they need. And some groups that were perceived to be particularly unsafe. We kind of covered all these things like areas that are unsafe, times of the day that are unsafe, and so on, and based a really strong perception that girls and young women, especially in large towns and cities, are, and all the victimisation statistics bear this out, are particularly unsafe, whereas men and males tend to be much more safe. Finish off the current and upcoming work. Talked about doing redevelopment of this community safety work for FACSIA again, developing a performance framework for night patrols, again, conduct non-policing kind of patrols in communities, and working with the Northern Territory Department of Justice on a review of their pornography campaign again, and also a whole community safety planning process that we're doing. So again, getting involved in a whole lot of areas around, very much around sort of policy development and sort of practical implementation of policy. I'm going to kind of skip over the future because I'm kind of out of time. But hopefully these slides will be available through the website anyway. Certainly available. Happy to give people more information. Feel free to get in contact with me at any time.